Teddy Conover, thanks so much for coming on episode 51 of the podcast. I'm pumped to have you in.
Yeah, I mean, the students that have been on here have been pretty great. Tem, Tucker, and Charlie Nuremberger, I think, and Carter Spawn.
We had Carter Spawn, I think, was the first student on here. And then, Tucker Heber was the first student. Then we had Carter and his dad, Jared Spawn, came on. And then Tem, and then just posted Charlie Nuremberg. That's about it, right? Yeah.
Yeah. No, I've loved the podcast ever since you have started it. I think it's a really cool idea. You know, not just teachers, not just students. You've gotten, I know, John Harbaugh on here and Joe Ehrman and some things like that. So really, really great what you're doing here.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a ton of fun, and Cesare has been awesome to work with. He sets everything up, so I wouldn't know where to start with all this stuff.
Yeah,
I mean, mics and the cameras.
I ran a podcast in here, still do, called Houndwave Sports, and we set this place up with your help, Cesare, back in beginning of my sophomore year. And the table configuration was a little different, and we didn't have all these fancy cameras on us, and it was very rudimentary setup. But we got some listeners, and talked about everything from like football to some school sports and things like that, and it was a blast. So
where'd that idea come from for Houndwave?
So yeah, my friend Taylor West, came up with the idea. He was like, we love sports and we're pretty into it, so may as well talk about it. Podcasts weren't quite as big back then as they are now. They've experienced a huge growth.
2 years, really.
Yeah, I mean, just a massive growth in the last few years. I know Apple Podcasts and Spotify have recorded just massive growth in listenership, and just.
Is that where you posted your Houndwave stuff to those channels?
Yeah. We originally used a software called Anchor, which is a pretty user-friendly platform to record and edit and upload podcasts, and you can listen to a lot of other ones. And then after a few of them, we were like, we should start putting this on some more platforms. So
and they make it so easy, like Spotify. I only had some issues with my logo and some of the parameters with uploading that, but otherwise it's very easy to get all your stuff onto Spotify and Apple Music.
Yeah, well, you guys have such good audio, and also like I love the little piano intro, and
it's all Cesare.
Yeah, that's crisp. And I think that if you put just like a little bit of attention to it, edit the audio a little bit, and just make it sound better, you can really attract a pretty nice audience, which I know you have with this.
Well, the biggest thing I think are the microphones. These are the best in the business right here that we're lucky to have on deck. Do you listen to podcasts a lot on your own?
I do. I listen to a good amount, yes. And then also I like getting recommendations from others. My dad listens to a huge number of podcasts. I feel like I see a lot from teachers. They tell me in the class to listen to some. And then I like to listen to Carlin's Hardcore History. I don't know if you've heard of that
Dan
one.
Carlin.
Dan Carlin?
You know Dan Carlin, right? He's awesome.
And some of the...
Which ones have you listened to? 'Cause I know he has a couple.
Some of the ancient Rome ones.
They're like 4 hours long, 5 hour long podcasts.
Yeah, and then I think he did one on the Pacific Theater in World War II, I believe. And they are just wildly interesting, and like these intricate descriptions, and he knows so much and does an insane amount of research. And then beyond that,
do you know what Dan Carlin does for a living? Because I thought he was a history teacher, maybe.
Is he not?
I don't know what he does.
I didn't know.
Now he probably just makes his podcast.
Right.
I think I've heard this recently, he spends almost a year planning the podcast before he delivers it and records it.
I mean, it's an insane amount of content to just like put out there, but people love it, as they should. And then other than that, I recently started listening to some of Sam Harris's podcasts, who talks about like philosophy and things like that. Shout out to Mr. Baker, who wanted me to listen to that.
We actually talked about Sam Harris on here.
Yeah, he's pretty wild, and says a lot of interesting things. I just listened to his podcast on free will, and it's so complicated. It kind of went over my head.
You have no free will.
Yeah, you're right. That's the argument. But when people hear that, they get all defensive and don't know how to respond. And that was kind of what I thought. But he does spell it out nicely for us mere mortals. So yeah, podcasts are great.
Yeah, he has a book called Free Will that I read. It's really short. It's like maybe 60 pages, but he kind of goes through it. That's one of his big talking points is that you have no free will. It's pretty interesting. I love Sam Harris. He's great to listen to. And he talks about meditation, of course, which is interesting as well. So tell me a little bit about your experience at Gilman and when you came into Gilman as a student. And maybe we could talk a little bit about this last year as a senior. It's been obviously very bizarre and strange, but some of the ways that you've been able to deal with the COVID during your senior year and kind of make it a memorable senior year nonetheless and find some silver linings.
Mm-hmm. So back to how I got to Gilman. I went to Calvert School for kindergarten through 8th grade, and they obviously have a pretty strong connection with Gilman. So I think 21 boys from my class at Calvert, and there were only 33 boys, went to Gilman, which is a huge percentage, and have greatly enjoyed my experience freshman, sophomore, and then junior year. Obviously, mid-March we got shut down, and for me, I thought my family and I did an okay job of sort of staying together, and we started having dinner more, and got a ping pong table for our backyard to sort of lighten things up as we were doing schoolwork. And actually, I feel like I stayed pretty busy during last spring. Teachers were still assigning work, and there were things to do. And then this senior year, been a few things to keep my mind on. I was the editor of the Gilman News, which was a pretty cool experience. And then also doing this podcast, whether it be in this studio or just over Zoom, and we would record it. And then also just in the last month and a half, being on the golf team has been pretty great. We didn't really get to have a season last year, and I feel bad for some of my fellow seniors who didn't really get a fall season this year or a winter season. I know basketball had some games, but still it was sort of compressed and there was no playoff. And it's meaningful to have a real sports season because you just get to connect so much with your peers. It's genuinely fun, but at the same time, you make these connections and have these experiences that you can take with you for the rest of your life. So it's been a good senior year, I think. Really enjoyed my classes and teachers. I think that's most of all has made this year.
You've had some great classes this year.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I can get into that in a second, but just having good classes and making connections with the teachers this year has made this academic year probably one of my favorites ever. So even being partially virtual.
Really? Wow. Mm-hmm. What was the hybrid start like for you, having to kind of learn at home and then come in a couple days a week? And it sounds like you managed everything pretty well with not too many issues this year.
Yeah, it was fine. I mean, I wanted to come in as much as I could. I live pretty close by, so sometimes walk or drive, but just coming into school was always nice because I think I and many others do prefer in-person learning. You get to raise your hand, which is a little easier than unmuting on Zoom. And all teachers at Gilman at least that I had, did a really good job of adapting to having kids on Zoom and in the room. But just having a few students around you and sitting down and actually raising your hand, I thought has always suited me a little bit better. But I still got a lot out of virtual classes. I found that they sort of give structure to your day in a time when you can lack structure. I made sure always to take classes in a different room than my bedroom because if you're living in that small of a space, things can just get a little not great. Mm-hmm. And was always, I feel like actually Zoom made me a little bit more, organized, and because it's all right, you got to be at that class at 11:20, and you can have lunch after that, but still. You got to go to assembly, and just made me sort of punctual in a way that wasn't.
Is it easy for you to get distracted, taking classes on Zoom for an hour at a time, with things popping up, or is there a way that you went about kind of managing just working from the computer and not getting distracted? Because it is so easy to go on another tab and start reading something else and go on Twitter and Instagram and texts are popping up.
Yeah, I have seen people watch YouTube or something like that, or play games during class, which is definitely easy to do. And I've done it a few times before, but I feel like just listening to the teacher, taking notes, I've always found taking notes to be this sort of relaxing and helpful approach to classes. And pen and paper notes. I could never do notes on Google Docs or anything. And I always felt that sort of kept me focused, and I would always leave my phone in another room usually, and it was, it just, I, wanted to empathize with the teachers. They don't want kids texting or playing games in class, and if you do, you're missing out on what you're learning for the day.
Why do you prefer handwriting notes over typing your notes? Because typing is a little bit more efficient. It's quicker. It's faster.
Yeah, you're right. And you can copy and paste helpful things. I don't know. I think there's been research done that, suggests actually writing it down helps you commit it to memory a little bit more. And also, that was just how I grew up doing it. In middle school, we'd always have to write notes, especially in math class. So I have just like binders full of papers. It's not as eco-friendly, I'll give you that, but I also like to annotate books quite a bit. So, just like writing those things down and making like the connections have always helped my brain, I guess, to, learn a little bit better.
No, I'm with you. I think I prefer writing things down a little bit more too, because you really have to process because you can't write everything down. Your hand doesn't move that fast. Whereas on a keyboard, you could just like type everything. Mm-hmm. You kind of have to pick and choose what's important. That's a skill.
Yeah. And also in this time of Zoom, I have always just like missed the amount that teachers like pass out papers. I remember the other day, Mr. Baum in US Since 60 gave us like a paper review of some book that we were about to read. And he was like, hey guys, I'm passing out paper. It's been a long time. But I loved that because that just reminds me of how school for me has always been. And and we all go on our screens enough. I try to limit that as much as possible. So another reason that I don't love typing notes out. And, I try to do homework on pen and paper, usually only with math that I can do that. But never loved the computer notes.
Who are some of your teachers? So you mentioned Baum, but who else do you have this year? And what has made those teachers during your senior year the most memorable year of school, as you said, so far?
So I have Mr. Baum for US Since 60. I have Mr. Broadus for Latin Lyric, Mr. Baker for Cormac McCarthy, and back in the first semester I also had him for American 60s literature. I have Miss Johnston at RPCS for AP Psychology and Mr. Jacobs for Calculus here. So all five of them have just been wonderful, really good at adapting to the online things, and just all of them are so exceptional at getting their students engaged, getting everyone to participate, and just contributing to learning. I feel like I really haven't had any negative teacher experiences here at Gilman. I feel like all of them have been so great to me. But the five this year have been such a strong repertoire. I actually, first semester, had signed up to take Mr. Baker's class. And then I think, as a junior, you sign up like March. So this was actually in person pre-COVID last year that we were signing up for classes. And I signed up for some other class. And by October or November, I was like, I need to take Mr. Baker's second semester class. I would be doing myself and him a disservice. It would just be so sad. And I had never even met him before. We just sort of established a connection. And some strings were pulled, and I guess some people left the class. So I got to take Cormac McCarthy, which is my book for today. And that's been incredibly meaningful to me, and probably one of my favorite classes that I've ever taken.
How many books have you read in that class?
So we started with Child of God, and then we read Blood Meridian, which took a while.
Blood Meridian is so hard. I was talking to Baker about that on the podcast because I read it last summer. And
I was thinking about bringing it in, but he brought it in before me, so I had to bring in this. I think I like The Road as much, if not more. It's just Blood Meridian is like probably the hardest book I've ever had to read, except for Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. I remember my sophomore year, Miss Carper, who was a great English teacher for me, said right before we started reading it, like, guys, this might be the hardest thing you read like in your scholarly career. And I think she's right. But Blood Meridian challenges it because you just have so much density, so many questions to ask that aren't answered. So many complex characters. How do you deal with the judge, the kid? And to anyone listening to this, I would highly, there are so many great senior electives. And I know juniors have pretty much already, submitted their schedules, but if you can somehow take, some sort of, literary theory class in your life, it would be a great, benefit to you, whether it be Cormac McCarthy or something in college, because, we're not all philosophers, but reading and delving into those deeper questions, it's a really cool experience. And the teachers that teach those types of classes are usually pretty passionate and interesting about it as well. And they can really help you get a lot out of the experience, which is what, I've seen so far.
So I definitely want to take Justin Baker's classes.
Yeah.
I want to be in there, but tell me about what he does in the classroom that you think works so well, or what he's done this year that has really helped you as a student.
Yeah. So I remember going back to 60s literature in the first semester. He would just bring in so many different eclectic elements into the class, which helped us all sort of form these connections. So there was a huge focus in that class on music. So every day, like before the class, we would listen to a song. He's, a huge record guy. And would talk about like the Rolling Stones. And actually the end of that class, even though it's a literature course, we didn't even write about a book. It was a album review, which is like one of my favorite projects that I've done throughout high school. I wrote about Let It Bleed by the Rolling Stones. And he took that. We read like James Baldwin, Sylvia Plath, and Kurt Vonnegut and more, and just sort of taking a lot of events that you don't read about in history class, and giving you a much more sort of comprehensive picture of what culture was like during that decade. And I feel like you could do that with any time period, really, and learning about more than just John F. Kennedy and Lyndon Baines Johnson, and delving deep into what was going on in American cities, and what artistic movements were happening. That's just as much history as who the president was and what they did at the time.
It's almost like American Studies class where you're getting the full picture on what was happening in the time period, what music was playing, who was in office, what books people were reading, poetry, all kinds of things that really create the whole picture of the 60s. I love that model.
It's such a good decade to do it too. I mean, I did say that you could do it with any time. There was so much going on in the 60s, both culturally and politically, that was interesting and meaningful, and to build a class around that, to build only a one semester class around that, made it pretty interesting for sure.
So has to has helped you with bombs. US.
Oh yeah.
Is it 1945 or 60?
So it used to be 45.
So
this is
60.
the first year that he did since 60, because I think he said he just kept losing time on the 2010s, and we did learn about Obama and to a lesser extent the Trump presidency, because it was sort of going on as we were taking the class in the first semester. And yeah, it definitely has helped. There's been a lot of times, I think we were reading about Betty Friedan, and no one knew who it was. And I was like, oh, that's, we read about her in 60s literature, and reading Cat's Cradle by Kurt Vonnegut definitely helped my understanding of the Cold War, because the book is, sort of a parable for nuclear holocaust and things like that. I love history anyway. So, both classes sort of fed off each other in a nice way.
So I was talking to Charlie Nurnberger about his senior speech, and it was one of my favorite ones, and I really enjoyed his message. But your senior speech was also amazing, and maybe for people who weren't on that webinar, that Zoom senior speech, which is a shame that we can't be in person to see that, but I think it really came through, and I loved it. I think all the teachers for sure loved it at Gilman, but maybe you could just summarize what your message is and what point you're trying to get across in that speech.
So if you couldn't tell already, pretty passionate about teachers and teaching, and that's pretty much what I wrote about. I wrote about, I'm going to get this number wrong, but I think 7 teachers who particularly impacted my Gilman experience. I know Miss Carper, Mr. Molina, Mr. Baum, Mr. Baker, Mr. Broadus, who has made Latin something that I probably want to continue doing in college. And many more, just about how they've shaped my life more than anyone else, really. And I think a lot of students here, while they might not think about that, probably that's the case for them. I mean, teachers for me have been so impactful, and have made me want to consider being a teacher when I grew up. And I get a lot of looks when I say that, but yeah, I have 2 teachers in here, but the tangible effect of teaching on young people is so great. And, there are just few professions and few occupations where you can, in a nice way, affect someone's life, quite like a teacher. And that doesn't mean you have to be one. I mean, I know Mr. Molina told me, do something you love or do something that you need to do right after college, and then come be a teacher. It doesn't have to be something immediate. I really liked that message. And another part of the speech was just sort of appreciate your teachers, during these times, because they're working really hard. I'm guessing, like, you were a teacher here during my junior year, I know. Are you working harder in this year than any other year?
I would say yes. I think it's a lot more time intensive in terms of preparing documents and putting them on Canvas and sending emails and just kind of navigating the online world. I don't know if I would say I'm working harder. It's just a little bit more tedious than showing up in the classroom with our books or whatever it is we're talking about that day. It's a lot of coordination. Right now, it's basically, for me, trying to figure out what classroom I'm who's in person, who's on digital for the day. So I think it's a lot of that this year, but I think we've made it work for sure.
So I remember the one teacher I forgot who I mentioned in the speech was Mr. Fitzgibbon, who I've always been more of a humanities and languages person. STEM has it's been fine, but it's just not ever been something that I've been super passionate about or loved. But he made honors bio like the best class ever, and just loved learning. He was so hands-on and knowledgeable and like genuinely passionate about the material, and that made like biology something that we could be excited to go to class for every day, which is like that's just great. I mean, dreading classes is kind of a brutal part of a school day, and if you don't have to do that because you have great teachers and you have a good attitude about learning itself, then you can make that experience a lot more enjoyable.
So you listed 7 different teachers from your Gilman experience, and they all have different personalities. They all have different teaching styles. What do you think is kind of the common thread amongst all the teachers that you feel really had an impact on you, and what do they do in the classroom that is so effective, would you say?
Boy, that's a great question. I would say all of them, are teaching material and then also making connections outside of the material. So, in English last year with Mr. Molina, we would be reading Huck Finn, and then he would show us he would show us, I know, the YouTube video for Jay-Z's 444, the story of OJ. And make these interesting connections. Miss Carper was always the same way. And when you can do that, and so making connections, and then also all of them are so exceptionally every teacher at Gilman is so exceptionally knowledgeable about the material and passionate about it. They care that you learn it. And I think those things really make learning from them an easier experience, but at the same time, a more significant experience to me, because you just get so much out of the class when you come in with an open mind and you hear these different perspectives, even if it's on something objective like math. If you can teach math in a way that has students engaged and asking questions, then that's very valuable. And that's where I've really found some awesome teachers.
Yeah, it's something that I picked up in that master's program that I did coming into Gilman, was call it, I guess, the hook of the class. And I think that the first 5 to 10 minutes of the period are really important, because you have to get everyone's attention, and maybe it's not directly related to what you're actually talking about or doing during the bulk of the class. But if you can get 16, 17-year-old guys focused on something interesting or something they care about, right, you'll have them for the rest of that period. 80 minutes is a long time to
sit around. We're teenage boys. I mean, we want to get up and
especially with the computers in front of you now.
Right. That's so true. Have you? I know not many of my teachers do this anymore, but back in the beginning, it was like there was a little 5-minute break in the middle of class to let people stand up. I think that's good to help people refocus when they come back. Or some people just say, like, we have 80 or 70 minutes to work with, but I'm going to let you off at 50 minutes or 60 minutes, and you can just go do some work related to the class for 10 or 20 minutes. And I think that's just as good.
Through Zoom, through your hybrid learning or your classes on Zoom, are there any kind of practices that you think are pretty effective? I was thinking the other day about the chat box that I don't use that much, but I think for a class that maybe isn't as talkative, or you only have the same couple of students speaking, especially in English classes, for the majority of the time, having like requiring everyone to write in the chat box just to stimulate everyone. Because it is easy to lose guys. Like sometimes I have a guy going off the camera. I don't know what he's doing. He's going to the fridge, he's making eggs and he's coming back, and it's like, where'd you go? Yeah. Right. So trying to get everyone engaged through Zoom is hard, but I think there are practices out there, especially this year, that teachers are getting down and are effective.
Yeah. I mean, whatever practices that are, teachers find that are effective, probably need to start being used, because I feel like virtual learning, even after COVID, will still be something that could be used pretty widely, because now we realize we have the capacity to do it, even if we prefer in person. But still,
right, there are no snow days anymore.
Yeah, exactly, very true. Yeah, still, I would say I know Mr. Baum likes to do this at the beginning of a lot of classes. He'll have everyone write in the chat like some interesting fact that they found from the reading, or that they know about the 70s or something like that. And that just sort of gets everyone going. And it can be tired, if it's 8 a.m. and you're a teenage boy waking up from 5 hours of sleep, you can be kind of tired. So just sort of getting you engaged, and that's what really matters, because then you're not as scared or annoyed to raise your hand and contribute to the class. Because for me, the best classes are when you're having class-wide discussions and everyone's participating, because you get those different perspectives and you get new opinions and facts that you haven't heard before that make you think. And that's a pretty huge part of learning.
So let me ask you a question. You talked about your interest in becoming a teacher, and you love school. So do I. If you were to come back to Gilman at some point and teach a senior elective class, is there a specific subject or time frame or area that you would want to teach?
Yeah,
or choose as elective?
So Latin has always been something that I've been really interested in. I think I would want to do some sort of class connecting Roman mythology to modern literature, where you see it's everywhere. Just mythological allusions and things like that are just permeated throughout like all facets of literature and culture. So I know the song Ramble On by Led Zeppelin is about the Hobbit. And there are so many songs kind of like that are about, mythology and fiction and things like that. And it's very cool to see that. And, Cormac McCarthy himself is littered with biblical allusions and Roman and Greek mythology as well. And to get a full comprehension of those books, it would be cool for someone to really understand that mythology.
Where'd your interest in Latin spring from? When did that start?
Yeah, so had a great 8th grade teacher at Calvert School. All 8th graders at Calvert are supposed to take Latin. His name was Mr. Norton. He used to work here. And he was just this really great and jovial guy who taught Latin in a way that I could understand. And I wasn't even sure if I would take it in high school, but I was like, all right, whatever, I'll take it. And I've had Mr. Broadus for sophomore, junior, and senior year, and he's been incredibly meaningful to me. Just reading poetry and like we read the Aeneid last year by Virgil. And all of that is, some people can find just translating the poems and talking about it a little monotonous or boring, but I think it's really interesting to see both like literary techniques that they used and stylistic flair and stuff like that. I'm not sure if you're into poetry, but I'm guessing you are. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
And as an English teacher, yeah, and then also the historical and like cultural significance of each of those things. So it was pretty no-brainer for me to take Latin lyric this year, where we discussed like lyric poetry of Catullus and Horace. And then in college, I'm pretty sure I want to do, expand a little bit farther on that.
Study Latin, maybe?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know any Greek, so majoring in classics or whatever. I have no idea what I'm going to major in, but
it's all right. You've got a few years before you.
Yeah, exactly.
What was the college process like for you this year? And maybe, I'm sure it will be a little bit different for these juniors coming into their senior year, but maybe what advice would you give a junior who's trying to figure out, what am I supposed to do now that, I can't really go to campus and walk around and try to figure out where I want to go. It's a little bizarre right now in terms of applying to colleges and figure out the next step. How would you maybe help a junior or underclassman with that process during COVID?
Yeah. So first off would be like, keep your options open. If you had an idea in sophomore year, like, oh, I'm totally going to go to Hopkins or something like that. Maybe, maybe apply, but also look at some other places. And I think actually now college campuses and some tours are opening back up. So that would be hugely important. Pretty much every school that I applied to, I was lucky enough throughout like junior year pre-COVID to have toured, which was, definitely helpful to get a better sense of what the school was like, what the programs were like. But then also school websites are so well done, because these admissions people know that that's how a lot of people will be introduced to their school, via the website and the categories of study that they have, and so you can gain a lot from websites. Also, I would say just on the college process in general, it's really stress laden, and you can help yourself out with two things. One would be not procrastinating too much. So I'm not great with procrastination, but I remember like all of the essays due January 1st. We tried to finish like December 27th or something. Thank you to Miss Follinsby. She's the greatest person ever for helping me out with that. And secondly would be Mr. Baker gave an assembly on this literally yesterday. It doesn't define your worth or your intellectual worth like in any way. So the college process itself is how good you are at the college process. And obviously that doesn't mean, don't focus on school. School is incredibly important and learning and things like that. But like a standardized test score could not define a person less. I mean, I'm not saying don't take them or don't try, but if you don't get results that you want, it means pretty much nothing about like who you are as a person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would 100% agree. It is a stressful time though. It's a stressful first couple of months, I guess. The full year of senior year is you're just trying to figure out that next step. And
for me, it was just like the amount of emails. I've always been stressed out by emails because I always think it's like, oh, you did something wrong, you got an email. And the college process has infinitely many emails, so just be wary of that. But it just goes from like September, and then there's a bit of a lull from like November to when you actually get, most people are applying early, your early decision back. I didn't get the news I wanted for early decision. So, my process took until April. But it's just a grind. And I guess you just got to embrace it because you don't really have a lot of other options.
So Penn is a phenomenal place, and congratulations on getting in there. That's awesome. You're going to love Philadelphia. What was it about Penn when you were on campus your sophomore year, you said?
I went back. So I went my like February of 2020. So I was pretty lucky to get there like right before
nice.
Things went down. And then also what's really funny about Penn is I went with my brother to visit back in like February of 2017, a really long time ago, and got this hat at the Penn school store and would wear it around all the time. A lot of people at the golf course that I play, I would always wear it, and they'd be like, "Oh, what's your connection to Penn?" And I'd be like, "Absolutely nothing. I just liked the look of the hat." So it was kind of funny that it came full circle, and now I'm going. But
that's awesome.
Yeah. So they have so many great departments, a really great community. I love the urban vibe of Philadelphia and where the campus is. Their classics department is pretty amazing, which is important to me. Humanities, of course. I've heard so many great experiences about it, which I guess you can say of any school, but it was just after I took the tour, I just kind of knew that was where I wanted to go. And I, honestly, this is probably the right word to use. I was a little bit lucky. I got in. I know plenty of students who would be great students that unfortunately didn't. And that's just kind of how it goes. And again, it doesn't really define you. But back to actually Penn, it just felt right. I guess I can't say. I mean,
it's really a feeling, right? When you get on the campus and you can kind of see yourself there.
That's the operative phrase. Yeah, I saw myself there more than anywhere else, I think. And just an intellectual community with a social scene. And they like to call themselves the social Ivy. And I don't know. I think that's kind of weird because you went to Harvard, and I'm sure there was a good social scene at Harvard. But
I've heard Penn is the top.
Yeah,
it's the place you want to be. But I'm from Philadelphia, so I'm a little outside of Philadelphia. So biased, and I love Penn's campus. I love Philadelphia. So yeah, you're gonna have a great time there. What are you looking forward to the most for the next 4 years?
Just like a fresh start, I think. Getting to meet so many new people and making new bonds with teachers, and acclimating to a new, maybe not new culture, but just a new location, really.
Yeah. Close enough though, and you could get home if you need to.
Yeah. Great. Take the train. Having a car in Philly would probably be a tough proposition.
No.
But the just prospect of being in a new place, living there and making those new connections with teachers, with classes, and with people, I think is something to be really excited for. And that's really the same for pretty much anyone going to college. And then at Penn specifically, I mean, Ivy League athletics. I know you were a part of that. Always fun to watch. And there's just going to be a lot of cool stuff to do.
Yeah, a lot to do, a lot to see, a lot to get involved with. So it's going to be awesome. So as you look back on Gilman and your time here, your 4 years at Gilman School, what do you think you're going to miss the most, or what really makes Gilman so unique that you'll kind of keep in mind as you move forward and go through college?
Yeah, I was thinking about this the other day. I have very few classes left. I think
there are like 4 or 5 for seniors now.
Yeah, they said this morning I was in math. And Mr. Jacobs was like, yeah, seniors, you guys have the AP exam on Tuesday. And I was like, what? That's so soon. So I'm definitely going to miss it. What exactly I'm going to miss? I think just like everyone having such great empathy of each other here. Everyone really cares what you're doing, whether it be teachers or students. And they want to talk to you. They want to connect with you. They'll come watch you at sporting events or at the musical, or I've done GTV with Cesare here, and that's been really cool to go see my friends play and capture them on videos to keep that forever. It's just a really special environment where you make these connections. I keep using that word, connections with other people, and they're really strong. I mean, I've just gotten to know you and Mr. Baker and pretty much all my teachers just this year, and I feel such a strong bond with all of them. That's unique, I think.
Yeah, you're cared for here, and you're appreciated, and it's a small enough community where everyone kind of knows what each other are doing, whether that's the arts or athletics or classes even. So it's something to cherish these next couple of weeks for sure, and look back on as you move forward. I'm the next step.
I'm definitely glad that we're all so thankful that the administration and people like that are trying to make this last few months really meaningful and special for us. I think we're getting a prom in June, and we got a lot of special events coming up, which is really cool. Got to see The Hypnotist, which was a blast.
Tell me about that, because I haven't seen that, and I don't really know what all the fuss is about with The Hypnotist.
I take psychology, and my psychology teacher the next day, Trevor Weiner, and I were talking to her about it, and she was really skeptical about it. And so for people who haven't seen it, it's pretty much a guy comes in, he takes, the entire senior class was there. So he takes 11 people up to the stage area. Really, it was just sort of an opening, sits them down and performs hypnosis on them. And it's not what you think. It's a longer process, and it's way more effective than you think. Like, these people we're kind of controlled, I mean, by this guy in a cool way.
11 students, 11 seniors
they
are
were all
standing in a line.
Sitting in a line. Yeah. And he would be like, and sleep. And after a while of, trying to get them to do this, he would snap and their heads would bow and they would be in some sort of, I think, conscious state. He described it as like conscious, but like below the level of normal consciousness or something like that. And you're skeptical. I know you are.
Subconscious state.
Yeah, something like that.
Wait, so tell me, can you hear what he's saying to the 11 candidates as you're sitting in the crowd?
I sat in the crowd. Unfortunately, I didn't get picked, but you absolutely can hear what he's saying. And he makes it a show. Like he wants you to be entertained even if you're not, being hypnotized.
So what is he saying to the 11 people at once as it's leading up to the sleep now part?
You're so relaxed. You're falling deeper and deeper. And it's funny, and I can't describe it well enough, but if you were to be there, you would get it, and go if you can in the future, because
I definitely want to.
It is amazing and one of like the craziest things I have ever seen. So that was again, thank you for I think the Gilman Alumni Foundation does that for us, and that was just an awesome experience.
So the hypnotist, that's a silver lining of this year.
Oh, absolutely.
Are there some other silver linings you can think of a senior year that wasn't exactly what you probably expected, but still has some great moments and memories?
Yeah. So getting to give a senior speech in person, not over the computer, was great. I would say having a full golf season like we're doing has been really cool, and very much a silver lining. I would say just coming in and going to like the South Tent or lunch and just seeing everyone and talking is just a great thing to do on a daily basis, and or I guess 3 out of 5 days of the week for most of the year. And I got to go, not Gilman related, but I got to go to the one Ravens home game. So that was definitely, something that didn't expect to be able to do. But I think next year, man, I'm not going to be here, but I think there could be a pretty normal experience, which would be really cool.
Yeah. Hope so. Hope things change a little bit this summer and we get back to normal. And we talked a little bit about The Road, Cormac McCarthy.
So this is my book, Cormac McCarthy, The Road. He wrote it in 2006, one of his later books. The third one we're reading. One of the best books I've ever read. So to give a very light summary, it's essentially a father and a son who are in this sort of I don't want to say apocalyptic, but post disaster world. And everything is gray and cold, and they're on this road, they're walking together, and it's pretty much just, a fight to stay alive. But then there are many different ethical questions that are asked throughout. The writing style is very beautiful and sort of intricate. He pulls a lot of biblical scenes, as I mentioned before, and then ties that into the story itself. And I would highly recommend it. It seems relevant for any time period. There's no prerequisite to reading it. It's sort of simple as a story, and there are lots of symbols like the sun and the journey and things like that are common across all literature. But he twists it a little bit and makes it a little bit interesting.
What are some of the questions that you guys talk about in terms of making this book about a father and a son in a desolate disaster, pretty dark and heavy read, right? Yeah. Pretty dark and heavy landscape. How does Mr. Baker make this text real for the class and make it relatable for you guys to discuss?
Yeah. So one of the good questions is there's a scene where they come across some other people that they found, and it's the first time that they interact with anyone else. Essentially, I won't spoil it, but the father, after they see these people, say like, "Oh, we're the good guys," and the son is like, "Why are we the good guys?" And it's like, because we're carrying the torch, and whatever that means, like, how do you define yourself as the good guys? we in America think we're the good guys, but some people around the world would think differently. And it's the same with a lot of groups. We as Ravens fans think we're the good guys, but Steelers fans would disagree. And just like those questions of like defining yourself, what is good and bad. And then another question, unrelated, more philosophical, was, these two people in a desolate land with no one else other than, say, for a few scenes, with literally no one else. This is going to sound weird, do they really exist? Like, you have each other, yes, but when you don't have anyone else to interact with, are you empathetic? Are you kind? You're not showing it because you can't be kind to no humans. And just like the question of, do you have an identity and do you exist when no one else is there? So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I love that book. And actually, I have it in my curriculum. I chose not to teach it at the end of last year just because I felt like the time was so heavy as it was. And just to give that to it's the last book that we read in English 11 curriculum. And
really? Okay, so you guys are now reading this. Because I remember, Melina, we read Huck Finn, which a few other teachers actually read, because he wrote his book, Jim Huckleberry.
Yeah, we talked about Huck Finn on his episode.
Yeah, and then we also read like Gatsby, and Handmaid's Tale was really good, and Ragtime by E.L. Doctorow. That's a really good book. I like that one, but I didn't know you guys were reading The Road. That's cool.
Yeah, it's a great one. It feels heavy when you're reading it, so I didn't know.
Have you guys started?
Not yet. No, okay. We're finishing a couple plays. Death of the Salesman. We just got through.
I read that last year.
Then another play called Between Riverside and Crazy. Okay. So we're gonna try to squeeze The Road in. Yeah, but it is a heavy one.
It does. It is heavy, but it reads really quickly because the font size is huge and there's a
spaces.
Lot of and it's just really compelling to read. Like you have to know what happens next, even if it's nothing. I found that I read this book a lot faster than a lot of other ones.
Is there another McCarthy novel that you want to get to next, or since this is the last one of the course, right?
Yeah, I've heard of Suttree, which is one of his earlier books, and it's very different to a lot of the other ones. I think it's like supposed to be somewhat funny, and I don't know. I want to see Cormac from a maybe not life and death perspective, like the 3 books that we've read so far have been. And then also No Country for Old Men. I haven't even heard much about that, but I know it's like one of his most famous works. And beyond that, he just speaks to me in a way, maybe it's just because it's being taught by Mr. Baker, but he just speaks to me in a way that a lot of authors haven't before. It's like sort of simple yet really complicated writing. And he makes you think like so much in ways that maybe Huck Finn makes you think, but that's only one book, and he seems to do it with every work.
Awesome, Teddy Conover. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast today. It's an awesome time having you. And good luck with the next couple weeks, and I hope you have a good end to your senior year.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.